School Improvement Program and Societal Participation. Unit Introduction. Dear learner, welcome to the Unit School Improvement Program and Societal Participation. I hope that you remember what you discussed in Unit 3 regarding an overview of participatory societal participation. In this unit, you will discuss the school improvement programs and the role of society. At the same time, this unit focuses on the major domains of school improvement and the role of different partners in school-society relations. Well, stay. Unit Learning Outcomes. Upon completion of this unit, you should be able to distinguish the role of parents, community, society in implementing SIP. Identify major components and domains of school improvement. Lesson 1, School Improvement Programs and the Role of Society. Dear learner, School Improvement Programs and the Role of Society is the first lesson of Unit 4 that you are going to learn in school-society relations. This section provides an illustration on the concept of School Improvement Program and the major component in SIP. You are advised to read each topic in detail and relate with the existing school improvement program that you working at your school. Well, stay. Activity. Dear learner, what is school improvement? More specifically, what are the domains of school improvement? What can be the role of the parents, community and the larger society in implementing school improvement programs, SIP? Well, I imagine you have very well tried to examine how and what type of school improvement indicatives are effective for educational institutions, express the domain of SIP and the role of the community in implementing SIP properly. Now, check your reactions with what pursues. Nowadays, driven by the serious consequences of school accountability, School Improvement Program, SIP, is the focal point in the community of professional educators. Numerous programs and strategies for improving schools have been implemented over the years. While they differ in many respects, one common theme is the importance of the school leaders. That is why the emphasis on self-improvement has increased in the past decade as a consequence of the trend in most countries of decentralizing the responsibility for the implementation of educational reform. Alongside this increase in political pressure for institutional renewal, there has been a steady realization that traditional strategies for educational change are not working. In recent years it has become starkly apparent that as strategies for educational reform, neither centralization nor decentralization work and that a better way must be found. Many of the educational initiatives that have been recently spawned under the school improvement umbrella are unfortunately, however, simply tinkering at the edges. Hopkins, 2000. Well, school improvement is a strategy for educational change that focuses on student achievement by modifying classroom practice and adapting the management arrangements within the school to support teaching and learning, that is a medium-term and systemic orientation. It is only through viewing school improvement holistically and by adopting a purposeful and strategic response that the challenge of enhancing student achievement will be met. Hopkins, 2000. We can say this because it is becoming increasingly clear to us that most school improvement efforts do not drive down to the learning level. Unless school improvement strategies impact directly on learning and achievement, then we are surely wasting our time. Activity. Dear learner, what are the major components incorporated in school improvement? What ingredients are important to bring about effective school improvement program? The review of recent relevant research and literature revealed that there is not one singular act that schools can engage in to become more successful. Rather, It takes years of hard work focused on school improvement to achieve success. Above all, improvement occurs through organized social learning, not through the idiosyncratic experimentation and discovery of variously talented individuals. Elmore, 2000. With regard to this point, Lythwood and Duke, 1999, say that the major issue to consider in school improvement is developing people, because people are the organization. Organizational improvement comes from the improvement of the people who are members of the organization. It is the duty of teachers, educational leaders, community and the government at large to create and share knowledge so individuals in a school are developed. That is why we said that developing people in the organization can have an overarching effect on the culture of the school. Therefore, the focus of educational reform in any SIP endeavor is to create powerful learning on the part of students, where learning is constructive inquiry not passive reception, and where the social climate is expansive instead of restrictive. Such classrooms exist in schools whose organizational conditions and cultures are characterized by high expectations, collaboration and innovation. We say this, because the more the organization of the school remains the same, the less likely will there be changes in classroom practice that directly and positively impact on student learning. Then, powerful learning subsumes a range of cognitive and affective processes and outcomes. By creating such powerful learning situations, competent teachers, educational leaders and parents are instrumental in raising the levels of achievement of their students. Hopkins, 2000. However, when we mention student achievement, the impact is not just on test scores and examination results, but also on the student's learning capability and their self-esteem. Powerful learning therefore refers to the ability of learners to respond successfully to the tasks that they are set, as well as the tasks they set themselves, in particular to integrate prior and new knowledge, acquire and use a range of learning skills, solve problems individually and in groups, think carefully about their successes and failures, evaluate conflicting evidence and to think critically. Accept that learning involves uncertainty and difficulty. Hopkins, 2000. The development of such a range of learning strategies is commonly termed as effective SIP achievement, which refers to the learner's ability to take control over their own learning processes. That is why school improvement efforts have focused on professional learning communities and professional collaboration for the last 2 decades. Activity. Dear learner, what are the roles of teachers, educational leaders, families, communities, society and the government at large in enhancing school improvement program? To start with, redesigning institutions and improving educational practice are massively more complex. As noted earlier, they involve changes of the most fundamental kind in the norms and values that shape work in schools. In the way the resources of the system get used, in the skills and knowledge that people bring to their work, and in how people relate to each other around the work of the organization. Based on the above premise, then let us look at the responsibilities and duties of different stakeholders in brief. First, it convinces that the teacher's task is not simply to teach, but to create powerful contexts for learning. It is the integration of content, process and social climate that puts the power into the powerful learning experience. Outstanding teachers take individual and collective responsibility to base their teaching on the best knowledge and practice available. Schools will not improve unless teachers, individually and collectively, develop. While teachers can often develop their practice on an individual basis, If the whole school is to develop, then there needs to be many staff development opportunities for teachers to learn together. Hopkins, 2000. Secondly, effective leadership in schools in this era is linked to the leader's ability to facilitate school improvement. The obvious core of school improvement is the role of the leader as an instructional leader, which is such a complex role. The teachers, staff members, students, and pertinent stakeholders have to buy in to the vision of the leader and to assist the leader in the implementation of school improvement. A variable that is directly related to school improvement and to the roles, skills, traits, and perspectives of the leader is the culture of the school. Jones, 2009. Third, successful schools seem to have ways of working that encourage feelings of involvement from a number of stakeholder groups, especially students and their families. Schools that are successful at development establish a clear vision for themselves and regard leadership as a function to which many staff contributes rather than a set of responsibilities vested in a single individual. Hence, the coordination of activities is an important way of keeping people involved, particularly when changes of policy are being introduced. Here, communication within the school is an important aspect of coordination, as are the information interactions that arise between teachers. Hopkins, 2000. Similarly, principals, who meet the needs of their staff members socially and emotionally, encourage them to take risks, and help them grow professionally, help change the culture of their schools. Fourth, Elmore, 2002, views school improvement as something that goes together with strong internal accountability. Hence, there should have to be school accountability. This is because an alternative approach to school reform centers on the notion of accountability and systems to support accountability. Fifth, as noted in the previous section, the success of these policies, reforms and improvements will depend, in large part, on the willingness of policy makers to model the kind of learning they are expecting from educators, to scrutinize their own actions and consequences and to modify policies based on their impact on practicing performance. Elmore, 2000. So to summarize this phase of the discussion, much school improvement work assumes that in practice all schools are the same, that a strategy such as development planning will work as well in one school as another. We can argue here that if policy is to positively affect practice, the school improvement strategy needs to reflect a blending of focus between management arrangements and classroom-level conditions. In addition, schools at different levels of effectiveness require different school improvement strategies. Put simply, schools at different stages of development require different strategies not only to enhance their capacity for development, but also to provide a more effective education for their students. Strategies for school development need to fit the growth state or culture of the particular school. Hopkins, 2000. It is experience and research such as this that provides the most positive critique of current centralized policies. There is no doubt that most governments are committed to the aspirations of school improvement. What is often lacking is a considered conceptual framework in which to drive forward and deliver the educational agenda. Most national authorities identify targets for achievement in key learning areas. Having done this, they need also to address four further key issues as cited by Hopkins, 2000. They are: 1. Government and other educational agencies should be developing and piloting curriculum and instructional programs that directly address in implementable ways the targets that are being set. 2. If this is achieved, a range of policy options related to programs that really work, then schools could begin to select from among a range of options those strategies that address the particular targets they have set, the learning needs of their students, and the particular stage of development the school is in. 3. With a series of program options available, schools are then in a position to address more directly the crucial issues of staff development and consistency of implementation that are so necessary for ensuring student achievement. 4. This would make it easier for governments and other agencies to target funding to those schools in the greatest need, in the far more secure knowledge that what they were going to do would achieve the goals the system as a whole had set itself. If we put improvement of practice and performance at the center of our theory of leadership, then these other theories of leadership role must shift to theories about the possible skills and knowledge that leaders would have to possess to operate as agents of large-scale instructional improvement. Eventually, leadership must create conditions that value learning as both an individual and collective good. Leaders must create environments in which individuals expect to have their personal ideas and practices subjected to the scrutiny of their colleagues, and in which groups expect to have their shared conceptions of practice subjected to the scrutiny of individuals. Privacy of practice produces isolation. Isolation is the enemy of improvement. Elmore, 2000. To sum up, school improvement's time in the sun will be short-lived unless it can persuade its newfound friends that it is not a quick-fix response to educational change. Finally, we can argue that improvements and high standards require a coherent policy framework that emphasizes process as well as substance. Hopkins, 2000. Case Study 8. General Education Quality Improvement Package of Ethiopia. Despite rapid expansion of the education system, Ethiopia's education sector faces the following key challenges. Access to education opportunities continues to be an obstacle, especially for females and other most vulnerable children, poor students and pastoral areas. There are socio-cultural barriers to participation, especially for girls in rural areas. In addition, achievements in access have not been accompanied by adequate improvements in quality. The 2007 National Learning Assessment, NLA, in grades 4 and 8 show that student achievement is below the required levels. Achievement in grade 4 shows a reduction from the 1999/2000 baseline learning assessment, 47.9% to 40.9%, and achievement in grade 8 has also deteriorated, 42.6% to 39.8%. Among key factors identified in the 2007 NLA relating to low student learning outcomes include school organization and management, school supplies and availability of curricular and instructional materials. Another problem, the rapid expansion of the education system has left a considerable financing gap between available funds and the anticipated cost of investments needed to improve and maintain quality. The government's current vision for education development is described in the PASDEP, with the ESDP4 serving as the overarching framework, giving high priority to quality improvement at all levels. Within the framework of the ESDPs, the MOE has developed a General Education Quality Improvement Package, GEQIP. The overall purpose of the GEQIP is to improve the quality of general education throughout the country. Each component of GEQIP includes a set of priority programs, is closely linked to the other components, and is implemented at different tiers of government. As a result, Each level of government may have some responsibility for the implementation of each component to achieve the project's development objectives. To achieve the overall objectives, the project requires flexible approach in design so that effective coordination not only among components, subcomponents, but also among different levels of government and implementing units. Among the component of GEQIP, in Component 3 there is School Improvement Program, SIP. The objectives of the SIP component are to 1. Improve the capacity of schools to prioritize needs and develop a school improvement plan. 2. Enhance school and community participation in resource utilization decisions and resource generation. 3. Improve the government's capacity to deliver specified amounts of schools grants at the WIRADA level. And 4. Improve the learning environment by providing basic operational resources to schools. Similarly, under Component 4, Management and Administration Program, MAP, there is subcomponent which includes capacity development for school planning and management. The objective of this subcomponent is to contribute towards strengthening participatory school planning, management and monitoring for the purpose of greater effectiveness, efficiency and accountability in school performance, and improved teaching and learning. This plan anticipating that through enhancing the resources that schools have at their disposal, building capacity in school planning and creating mechanisms through which the communities decide how resources are utilized, the school improvement and school grants programs will be improved. The school improvement approach starts with schools and their stakeholders undertaking a self-assessment to identify their goals, followed by development and implementation of a school improvement plan. As part of the process, each school is required to include all stakeholders in the assessment of school performance, that is, teachers, students, parents, and community. It is emphasized that, a. The SIP is a critical process for the improvement of the teaching and learning environment, and, b. The process will bring control of schools into the community. Through the process of developing a school improvement plan, schools and their stakeholders will identify their needs and priorities. MOE 2008. Direction. Therefore, the purpose of this assignment is to review where the status of the school is currently applying the above government directions. To identify the local accountability with respect to how resources are used in every school and the extent of community involvement in the education sector was found to be substantial. In particular, it is critical to investigate those members of PTAs and the local communities are aware of the fact that their school is entitled to receive a grant based upon its level of enrollment. Then, do you have any mechanism in your school to conduct a self-assessment in identifying areas where improvements may be made? Second, the School Improvement Committees, SICs, should have to create a School Improvement Plan, SIP, which contains possible solutions and budgets to the problems identified in your school. Besides, revision of the SIP will be made based upon suggestions provided by key stakeholders, and once consensus has been reached, the SIC will begin implementation of the SIP. To do this, throughout the school year, each school is expected to monitor the operation of its SIP. With this formative data, the SIC, with assistance of other stakeholders, may revise the SIP as necessary. So, as part of the school community, you should have to assess what it looks like the promotion of horizontal relationships and collaboration within the school system, among students, between students and teachers, among teachers and between the school, parents and other members of the community with regard to the above government directions. Domains of school improvement, activity. Dear learner, the following activity can be used to facilitate conversations about school effectiveness. Select a factor. Is it an important characteristic of an effective school? How would this factor be demonstrated in practice? What evidence have you seen of this in your school? What practices need to be further developed or targeted for action? Nice. As we have seen in the previous lesson, a central part of the practice of school improvement should be to make the connection between teaching practice and student learning more direct and clear. The present generation of students deserves the best practice we can give them, and their learning should not be mortgaged against the probability that something good will happen for future generations. Improvement should be focused directly on the classroom experience of today's students. Elmore, 2002. For this purpose, effective schools have rigorous systems of accountability, a focus on teaching and learning, and stimulating and secure learning environments. DET, 2005. Very importantly, an effective school has agreed expectations and coherence around the quality of teaching required to impact on student performance. A constant focus on teaching and learning is entrenched in the culture of an effective school. Supported by effective leadership, effective schools provide ongoing learning opportunities for teachers to develop the skills, knowledge and dispositions necessary to teach to higher professional standards. Hence, effective schools are learning communities, the core element of which is a culture of collaboration and collective responsibility for the development of effective teaching practices and improved student achievement. Being part of a learning community means, therefore, contributing to the learning and knowledge base of the school and the school community. It is not simply about the pursuit of individual learning goals, but sharing knowledge for the benefit of the community and the achievement of its goals and vision. A learning community values diversity and maintains a focus on the continuous enhancement of teaching for all members of the community. DET, 2005. In this endeavor, two general models of school reform are included in the professional literature about effective school improvement program. One model advocates the exclusive use of research-based or scientifically proven methods to increase student achievement. This centralized decision structure making about how to improve schools includes the use of specific curriculum, delivered in specific formats to all students. In this organizational system, the state or district office personnel become supervisors who make decisions about products and processes. According to O'Neill, 2004, teachers become the worker bees in a factory model and students become the products. The emphasis on this approach was a direct result of the push for standards-based reform and accountability measures generated by the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001. A second general model looks at school improvement from the inside out and advocates the development of professional learning teams who are charged with the responsibility to determine what needs to be done at individual school sites in order to improve schooling for those students. The primary mission of professional learning communities is to improve schools by reducing the privacy of teaching practices, through teacher collaboration to solve problems and share teaching strategies. Guskey, 1998. When we are looking the commonalities and differences in two models of school reform, although the two approaches to school improvement are distinct, and at times even polarized, they share some common factors. Both concede in order to improve student learning, the focus must be on what students do in the classroom. This entails to us that without changing the behaviors of teachers, the outcomes for students will not change. Schmoker, 2007, described basic elements of effective instruction, and they all related to what the adults do. Good teaching has the most impact on student achievement, regardless of other reform factors. Another commonality is the goal of school reform, and that is to improve systems rather than pockets of success within a school or district. A systemic alignment of school improvement efforts is critical to whole school improvement. Individual knowledge only realizes potential through use of the knowledge by the entire organization, making it organizational knowledge, Leadbeater, 2000. Both models promote the extensive use of data or evidence to measure success. The successes of schools are currently measured and defined by the academic performance of students. Student learning is currently measured by student performance on external assessment. These differences are important as they direct the approach a school leader and school community takes in promoting school improvement. An understanding of these differences can help a school community comprehend current mandates and effects on decision-making, further clarifying the initiatives. On the other hand, Hopkins, 2000, states that one way of understanding the relationship between the conditions and a school's developmental priorities, or, in the terms of this lesson, the link between powerful teaching and powerful schools, is to consider Joyce's analysis of the characteristics of effective large-scale school improvement initiatives, Joyce, Wolfe and Calhoun, 1993. Typically, such initiatives focus on specific outcomes which can be related to student learning, rather than adopt laudable but non-specific goals such as improve exam results. Draw on theory, research into practicing the teacher's own experience in formulating strategies, so that a rationale for the required changes is established in the minds of those expected to bring them about. Target staff development, since it is unlikely that developments in student learning will occur without developments in teachers' practice. Monitor the impact of policy on practice early and regularly, rather than rely on post hoc evaluation. To summarize, as Chance and Segura, 2009, suggest that both organizational practices and instructional leadership behaviors contributed to developing successful collaborative efforts that, in turn, led to improved student achievement. 3 essential elements identified for successful collaboration are: A. Scheduled time for teacher collaboration. B. Structured and focused collaboration time devoted to improving instruction and student achievement, and C. Leadership behaviors that focused on student-centered planning and accountability. Therefore, while providing physical input such as teachers, textbooks and other services are necessary if the quality of education is to be improved, creating incentives that lead to better instruction and learning are also vital. Hanushk and Oesman, 2007, identify 3 key factors that enhance the quality of education. These are choice and competition between schools, school autonomy and school accountability. Based on the above premises, the government of Ethiopia initiates General Education Quality Improvement Package (GEQIP) in 2008. Which School Improvement Program (SIP) becomes one major component of this initiative. So, let us examine this initiative in brief below. The school improvement approach starts with schools and their stakeholders undertaking a self-assessment to identify their goals, followed by development and implementation of a school improvement plan. The schools are also required to maintain information data on the effectiveness of their plans. Throughout 2006 to 2007, the MOE developed a school self-assessment form, SAF, with assistance from REBs and teacher education institutions. The purpose of the SAF is to A. Review where the school is currently and B. to identify the areas most in need of development. The SAF identifies 4 domains as the most significant areas in need of school improvement: learning and teaching, student environment, leadership and management, community involvement. Within each domain, focus areas are highlighted and standards of performance indicated. Indicators of practice are provided for the school to evaluate its performance in relation to each standard. The school is encouraged to identify evidence or data that supports their assessment of how well they are meeting each standard. As part of the process, each school is required to include all stakeholders in the assessment, that is, teachers, students, parents, and community. The school assesses its strengths and weaknesses for each standard. Simultaneously, universities and colleges involved in teacher training were instructed in the use of the school improvement materials, the principles of school improvement and EMOE plan for school improvement in Ethiopia. Based on this, during 2007 to 2008 these institutions were reviewed and revised their curricula to incorporate the principles of school improvement in their teacher training programs. According to the MOE Blue Book's recommendations, schools should receive 10 BIR per year for every grade 1 to 4 child that is enrolled in school, 15 BIR per year for every grade 5 to 8 child that is enrolled, 20 BIR per year for every child that is enrolled in grade 9 to 10 and 50 BIR per year for every child that is enrolled in grade 11 to 12. The purpose of this grant is to cover schools' operating costs and augment non-salary expenditures. This amount will be reviewed annually, with inflation taken into account. Regions and WREDs are expected to top up the support from the government budget. All government schools will receive the school grant and the money can be spent on whatever is identified to be needed by the school, provided that it does not include teachers' salaries. When relooking the approach and technical rationale, the School Improvement Program, SIP, component of GEQIP will be implemented through the following 2 mutually reinforcing priority programs. School Improvement Program. This program is designed to assist schools to identify priority needs through a process of self-assessment. Develop an effective and practical school improvement plan to address those needs. And then monitor and assess implementation. School Grants Program. This program entails the provision of additional resources to schools and ABE centers to support implementation of the SIP, as well as realize measurable improvements in the quality of education service provision. Many studies of the school improvement process suggest that the involvement of teachers, students, and communities are vital for effective school improvement. Recognizing this, the SIP process in Ethiopia intends to promote school improvement at the school level through relying on local knowledge and resources within the community, for example involvement of stakeholders and their expertise. It is emphasized that A. The SIP is a critical process for the improvement of the teaching and learning environment, and B. The process will bring control of schools into the community. Hence, through the process of developing a school improvement plan, schools and their stakeholders will identify their needs and priorities. The grants that schools receive will thus enable the schools to effectively implement the plans that they develop. In order to assess the current status of the implementation and management of the school grants, and how school improvement processes relate to the planning and utilization of school resources, field visits were undertaken in different regions. In the regions visited, it was discovered that there is an effective system for the distribution and utilization of school grants already in place. In all of the regions that were visited, the PTAs were found to be strongly involved in the decision-making process regarding how the resources that the schools have at their disposal are to be spent. This includes school grants, community contributions, and any revenue that the school may generate. In general, community contributions were found to be higher than the level of resources that schools received through the block grant. Schools are thus at present effectively managing a level of funding higher than that would be realized through the full implementation of the block grant. Local accountability with respect to how resources are used is enhanced through PTA days, which typically takes place between 2 and 4 times a year in every school. All parents are invited to these events, at which they are entitled to ask questions about any aspect of the school life, from school discipline through to what the school has spent its money on. The extent of community involvement in the education sector was found to be substantial. In one rural school, it was discovered that every household in the Kbel had contributed to the school irrespective of whether they had a child enrolled in the school or not. Eventually, the school grants component of GEQIP will therefore improve the quality of education by facilitating an increase in non-salary expenditure and empowering schools and local communities to address the needs of their school. The MOE, REBs and WREDs will organize opportunities for schools to share their experiences and continue to formulate revisions to materials based on feedback from REBs and WREDs and data provided by schools. Activity. Dear learner, what do you learn from the lesson above regarding SIP? What serious domains does the GEQIP raise regarding the school improvement? What serious omissions are left out in our country's SIP endeavor? To what extent is SIP occurring in your locality? Be specific. Have you tried? Very nice. The role parents' community in the larger society in implementing SIP. Activity. Dear learner, the following activity can be used to facilitate conversations about school effectiveness. Select a factor. Is it an important characteristic of an effective school? How would this factor be demonstrated in practice? What evidence have you seen of this in your school? What practices need to be further developed or targeted for action? Nice. Dear learner, this is the last lesson for this unit. This section provides an illustration on the role of parents, community in the larger society in implementing SIP in particular and in facilitating student learning in general. You are advised to read each topic in detail and relate with the parents or communities that you are working at your surrounding school. In the previous section, we have seen that school improvement efforts have focused on professional learning communities and professional collaboration for the last 2 decades. The literature describes professional learning communities in many forms, which cover a wide spectrum of practices. Let me ask you some questions with regard to parents and community in relation to their contribution to the education system in general. Activity. Dear learner, in what ways do you consider parents as major partner to schooling? What are the major areas that families' communities participated in our educational system? To start with, as more people compete for available resources, more people need supportive services to survive, job assistance, housing assistance, financial support and medical care. Besides, the increasing urbanization of communities is also an important issue to mention here. People living in cities must turn to the community for various kinds of services. All the above points indicate that educators cannot do everything without the support of major partners. Above all, understanding the families and communities in which students live can help educators develop student potential. Families and communities can also support student learning. However, to do this means those students' families and communities must be considered resources to be tapped. As educational leader, then, the first task will be overcoming challenges to involving families and communities. If there is any gap at actual places, unavoidable function. Families and communities can be valuable resources for schools, and tapping these resources requires changing how schools perceive the parents and communities' values and beliefs. In system-wide improvement, schools don't get to choose whether they participate or not. Participation is condition of being in the system. Different schools might get to choose how they will participate. Some systems have allowed schools to enter various phases of an improvement process at different times. Some systems allow schools to choose among an array of instructional approaches as the focus for improvement. There are a variety of ways of introducing choice at the front end of an improvement process. However, change, as it has been conceived and carried out in the past, is not an option in responding to these problems. Large-scale, sustained, and continuous improvement is the path out of these problems. Improvement requires fundamental changes in the way public schools and school systems are designed and in the ways they are led. It will require changes in the values and norms that shape how teachers and principals think about the purposes of their work, changes in how we think about who leaders are, where they are, and what they do, and changes in the knowledge and skill requirements of work in schools. In short, we must fundamentally redesign schools as places where both adults and young people learn. Elmore, 2000. As we shall see shortly, large-scale improvement requires a relatively complex kind of cooperation among people in diverse roles performing diverse functions. This kind of cooperation requires understanding that learning grows out of differences in expertise rather than differences in formal authority. Based on the above premise, as schools are both reflections of the wider society and potential centers for change, then what is the role of parents? What is the role of the community? What are the roles of teachers, educational leaders, and the government at large in enhancing SIP? Together, what are the contributions of parents, communities, societies and other partners in facilitating student learning? All these questions are important issues to be raised here. Then, let us examine one by one in detail. First, let us look at parent involvement and their leadership roles. Engaging parents as leaders, advisors, advocates and decision-makers related to young children and school readiness must begin with a review of the concepts of parents as primary partners and a family-centered approach. Family-centered care represents a reciprocal relationship between providers and families. It is based on the philosophy that recognizes the pivotal role of the family in the lives of their children. This approach ensures that families are supported in the natural caregiving and decision-making roles for their children by building on their unique strengths. Hepburn, 2004. The concept of family-centered partnership or family-centered care grew out of the health, mental health and special needs communities. Families challenged with meeting the needs of their children, working closely with specialty service providers and supporting or providing intervention services, pushed for an equal voice and shared decision-making in the interest of appropriate care, education and intervention for their child. Eventually, Vigilance and advocacy efforts were supported by legislation, and continuing efforts have impacted many child-serving systems. Over time, experience, and the passionate work of many, various human services and education systems have moved along a developmental continuum to expand the perception and role of parents as primary partners and truly establish family-centered partnerships, family-centered care and family-centered schools. Hepburn, 2004. Hence, developing such strong parent-professional alliances is a critical first step in improving the quality and cultural and gender responsiveness of services to young children and their families. In addition, it is the first step to expanding family involvement to include families in advisory, advocacy, and leadership roles. Then, what are family involvement and leadership roles? Parent involvement in leadership in early care, education, and other services to young children and families encompasses many roles and activities. So, let us see some of the roles of parents in detail here below as stated by Hepburn, 2004. Parents as advisors share their perspective and experience in any part they play, whether it is time-limited, ongoing, formal or informal. The term advisory describes any role that enables family members to have direct input and influence on policies, programs, and practices that impact on the care and services children and families receive. Parents as advocates engage in any activity that attempts to influence someone on behalf of another. For parents, this may be for themselves or their child, but can move beyond to advocacy for children, programs or policy. Parents may take on a formal role and responsibilities within a program or organization or join a parent advocacy group or organization. Parents as leaders may have formal positions, roles, and responsibilities in collaborative efforts towards service or system implementation, improvement, or change. Leadership is a combination of values, skills, and observable behaviors that can be learned, improved and expanded. Can be adapted to address various situations in a changing environment, and will result in mobilizing people to expand their capacity to learn together and create the vision they share. In the context of early care and education, the role of parent as a decision-maker or leader goes beyond active involvement in their child's learning to include decision-making and leadership roles. For example, parents may serve on the childcare center board, on site-based management teams, or on advisory councils. They have the power to affect the offerings and climate of early care and education programs in the school. The trend towards site-based management and collaborative decision-making in early care settings and some schools illustrates these opportunities for parents to make a difference. When families participate as decision-makers at all levels, they influence policies, programs, and practices. Hepburn, 2004. Families as advisors, advocates and leaders may also take on the role of change agents. In a recent study, Dr. Gerardo Lopez and fellow researchers, 2001, observed different migrant families living in Texas to understand the roles the families played in supporting their children's educational development. Due to living conditions, poverty and other issues related to migrant work, many students of migrant families struggle in school. However, the children in these families were considered successful in school, in both academic and non-academic ways, and the researchers wanted to understand how these families were positively influencing how well their children did in school. LOWE, 2007. This research study found that although parents of successful migrant students did not regularly attend school functions, they strongly perceived themselves as being highly involved in their children's educational lives. These families appeared to be quite strategic in their choice of involvement. They saw the transmission of a work ethic as their way of being involved in their child's education. Parents participating in the case study recognized traditional forms of involvement, attending PTA meetings, parent-teacher contact, volunteering at school functions, as noteworthy, but did not necessarily see them as important forms of involvement that would make an impact on their children's academic development. From the above case study we can understand that the academic level of the parents, their socio-economic level, and their ethnic or racial origin were not determining factors for academic success. In addition, these studies reveal a relationship between parental involvement and enhanced student self-esteem, improved student behavior and better student attendance. For most schools, building partnerships entailed a transformation of the school's relationship with families, and required that the school take steps to create a more welcoming, inclusive environment. Rujan, 1995. Overall finding, home-school partnerships show that there is a positive and convincing relationship between family involvement and benefits for students, including improved academic achievement. This relationship holds across families of all economic, racial, ethnic and educational backgrounds and for students at all ages. LOWE, 2007. What does the research say about family and community engagement? LOWE, 2007, and Rujan, 1995, say the following. Students whose families are involved in their learning earn better grades, enroll in higher-level programs, have higher graduation rates and are more likely to enroll in post-secondary education. When families take an active interest in what they're learning, students display more positive attitudes towards school and behave better in and out of school. Children do best if parents can play a variety of roles in their learning. Helping at home, volunteering at school, planning their children's future and taking part in key decisions about the school program. And middle and high school students whose families remain involved in these ways make better transitions, maintain the quality of their work, develop realistic plans for the future and are less likely to drop out. From the above cases, we can grasp that fundraising campaigns and efforts to promote volunteerism may increase resources and improve classroom support, but these efforts will have little if any impact on improving student learning. Carter, 2003, and LOWE, 2007, state, the evidence is now beyond dispute. When schools work together with families to support learning, children tend to succeed not just in school, but throughout life. Hence, family involvement significantly contributes to improved student outcomes. Accordingly, leadership roles for parents are varied, and can include, as well as be expanded beyond, those traditionally associated with governance and formal support systems. The following list is intended to expand the thinking of leadership roles for parents in initiatives focused on school readiness as cited by Hepburn, 2004. Advisory Board Member, Quality Improvement Reviewer, Task Force Member, Speaker or Presenter, Program Evaluator, Mentor and Guide, Trainer or Co-Trainer, Peer Support. Focus Group Member, Community Guide, Translator-Interpreter, Panel Member, Materials Reviewer, Interviewer, Materials Developer Contributor, Key Informant. Group Facilitator, paid staff, recruiter, fundraiser, ambassador or spokesperson, representative, advocate, consultant, hiring committee member, networker. From the above clarification, we can conclude that whether parents act as an advisory or advocacy, the family coordinator or liaison plays a vital role in coordinating family involvement activities for the school. Therefore, as educational leader, the starting point to work with community is recognition of family strengths. This is because parents are a child's first and most influential teachers and often their strongest advocates. Parents teach, model and guide their children. They are the big-picture team members in their child's education. Many parents spend 365 days a year with their children and are the most knowledgeable about their history, interests, and abilities. Carter, 2003. Hence, we should have to consider that families as primary partners in their child's development and school readiness. In other words, we consider parents as leaders. Hence, with this base of respect and understanding, schools, families and communities can create productive partnerships in large and small ways. So, let's wind up this lesson by giving 10 Truths of Parent Involvement, as forwarded by Carter, 2003, the following tips. 1. All parents have hopes and goals for their children. They differ in how they support their children's efforts to achieve those goals. 2. The home is one of several spheres that simultaneously influence a child. The school must work with other spheres for the child's benefit, not push them apart. 3. The parent is the central contributor to a child's education. Schools can either co-opt that role or recognize the potential of the parent. 4. Parent involvement must be a legitimate element of education. It deserves equal emphasis with elements such as program improvement and evaluation. 5. Parent involvement is a process, not a program of activities. It requires ongoing energy and effort. 6. Parent involvement requires a vision, policy, and framework. A consensus of understanding is important. 7. Parents' interaction with their own children is the cornerstone of parent involvement. A program must recognize the value, diversity, and difficulty of this role. 8. Most barriers to parent involvement are found within school practices. They are not found within parents. 9. Any parent can be hard to reach. Parents must be identified and approached individually. They are not defined by gender, ethnicity, family situation, education, or income. And 10. Successful parent involvement nurtures relationship and partnerships. It strengthens bonds between home and school, parent and educator, parent and school, school and community. However, while research findings show school, family and community partnerships can result in improved student learning, many efforts designed to build these linkages often fail to improve student achievement. Why? Too often, collective energies are focused on well-meaning but more general forms of involvement such as volunteerism or fundraising. While these efforts are helpful and even important, studies demonstrate these critical findings. School, family and community connections linked to student learning are most effective at improving student achievement. And the most effective programs and interventions are those that engage families in supporting their children's learning at home. LOWA, 2007. Therefore, The strongest support for learning occurs at home through positive parenting styles, nightly reading, homework policies, and high expectations. Schools that measure their success in reaching out to parents by the number of volunteers and attendance at workshops and meetings could be missing valuable opportunities to connect with families who can't be there or who are not comfortable coming to school. Activity, dear learner. Before you proceed to the reading, try to mention some of the roles of community participation in education. Can you give some examples of community participation inside and outside schools in Ethiopia? Which one of the potential areas of participation do you think is very difficult to create and maintain for schools? Besides to parents or families, the policy for school improvement is also very clear that a school should be connected to its local community because schools operate in very distinct and different communities, they embody very different problems of practice, they include very different student populations, and they are at very different places in their effort to school improvement. Similarly, the Community School Board, which is quite diverse and represents many segments of a very diverse community, has been relatively stable and has served as a stable source of guidance and support for administrative leadership. Elmore, 2000. Hence, we should have to consider also the community as a support system. How can the community service families? What does it mean when we say community as a support system? Well, the community can provide informal support to families, as when neighbors watch each other's children or share resources, or it can provide formal support through its publicly or privately funded community services. Community services are necessary for several reasons. Though the child remains central, engaging families and community in education will not only help the children but help the family, school, and community as well. Therefore, when families and communities work collaboratively with the school, everyone's role becomes less stressful, more productive, and more rewarding. There will be fewer conflicts and problems. Because, providing opportunities for parents to share information about their children can help families and educators avoid conflict and develop collaborative relationships that encourage the best educational opportunities for students. Carter, 2003. From the above we can understand that schools must look for practical ways to build meaningful partnerships with families and communities. You can ask maybe why is focusing on family and community important as a big issue? Well, it is hard to imagine an aspect of school reform that is more important yet more neglected than strengthening the involvement of families and communities in the life of their school. It is impossible to imagine an excellent school that does not engage families and community members in meaningful, productive ways. Rugen, 1995. Above all, the community is a setting that provides much potential for learning. Libraries, museums, zoos, farms, businesses, people's experiences, and collectibles, family heirlooms, antiques, photographs, and so on, are all rich sources for involving children. To illustrate the community's potential for learning, an experiment was initiated in Philadelphia to try a school without walls. In sum, the community becomes a place and a resource for learning when citizens, parents, educators, business people, religious groups, service providers, legislators, are committed to mutually beneficial goals that focus on the positive growth and development of children. Burns, 2010. Studies also show that communities, too, can have a positive impact on school effectiveness. Although less abundant, Research on community engagement has found that when communities mobilize around school improvement efforts, many positive outcomes can be achieved, including improved student achievement, LOWA, 2007. A school will not achieve equity and excellence for all of the students in its care if it does not acknowledge, understand, and include the families and communities of all its students. Let's start with words of UN Millennium Project, UNMP, 2005, who comprises more than 250 experts from around the world, including scientists, development practitioners, parliamentarians, policymakers, representatives from civil society and UN agencies' ideas. When they are looking the relationship between education and society, they try to mention multiple benefits, and considered as unrealized potential. Because education is society's main instrument for reproducing itself and can be a key ingredient for social change. Education is about much more than children sitting in schools, acquiring skills that can be objectively tested. Both the inputs to and the outputs from education are far more complex than much of the usual international discourse suggests. This means that the concept of providing every child with a good quality education is not simply a function of having enough schools, textbooks, and teachers. It is very much a result of a social context in which education is seen as a right for all and in which all people have the opportunity to improve their economic and social welfare and participate in public life. UNMP, 2005. Hence, a decision affecting what is taught, who is taught and how people are taught are parts of the process of social reproduction. With respect to what is taught, the leading figures within one generation transmit to the next generation their understanding of history and the essential skills, knowledge and beliefs for the perpetuation of the society. At the technical level, this translates into the content of a curriculum, the standards for progression to the next grade, and so forth, but it is never completely removed from the much broader, and often highly politicized, context. With respect to who is taught, policies and practices related to resource allocation, placement of schools, the scope for private sector involvement and overt or invisible barriers to access led to outcomes that can either reduce or reinforce social stratification. With respect to how people are taught, the methods and practices in education are also means of communicating the ways in which societies are structured and should be structured in the future. UNMP, 2005. Greatly increasing access to good education, which almost always means making societies more inclusive and egalitarian, is not necessarily the result desired by those with the power to make decisions. But rather, community citizens have bona fide interest in the local school. They have invested their money, time and effort in the building of the school. Besides, their children attend the local school. They deserve to know what is taught at the school and also should take part in the building of the curriculum. They should be directly or indirectly involved in the teaching and learning process as resource persons. Schaefer, 1994. Having looking the roles of parents, communities and societies, then the next questions are, what providers can do? And what is the role of educational leadership in these endeavors? And so on, might be valuable issues. Educational leaders must provide positive leadership to develop partnerships with families and communities and be able to translate talk into implementation, commitment and resource allocation. Improving family involvement may require changes in resource allocations, time commitments and priorities. Administrators leading these efforts will need to monitor and nurture the effort continuously. Carter, 2003. Then, what providers can do: first, understand and value parents as primary decision makers for their child, and support families in taking on leadership roles. Hepburn, 2004. Hence, as regions and countries stabilize, it is necessary to adopt a long-term approach to community participation. This often requires a shift in roles for the community from focusing on the operational aspects of education, contributing resources, etc., towards the management and governance of education. Creating a shared sense of ownership around education needs to be emphasized from the start and retain a focus on activities and interventions to encourage locally generated participation and avoid participation fatigue. These changes in roles need to take place incrementally, supported by training and guidance so that community members feel empowered and confident in these roles. UNESCO, 2009. However, while family involvement is crucial, it is not easy to achieve. The key ingredient of success is commitment. The problem, then, is how to construct relatively orderly ways for people to engage in activities that have as their consequence the learning of new ways to think about and do their jobs, and how to put these activities in the context of reward structures that stimulate them to do more of what leads to large-scale improvement and less of what reinforces the pathologies of the existing structure. Above all, investing in professional learning is the key to ensuring that schools become learning communities where teachers work together, learn from each other and share best practice on effective teaching and learning. It is only through the collective work of teachers and by creating a shared professional knowledge that sustained school improvement will be secured. DET, 2005. Schools in the midst of reform must be able to solve problems. Intellectually stimulating organizational members to look at old problems in new ways is a way of facilitating the solving of complex issues which arise during school reform initiatives. Clearly, family and community are resources that educators need to draw upon. Parents are more likely to be involved if teachers and administrators engage in status equalizing activities that signal to parents that their contribution is valued. Our third dimension of teacher commitment relates to willingness to exert effort for the organization, one of the dimensions identified by Ross and Gray, 2006. For example, willingness to work collaboratively on school tasks. High levels of individual teacher efficacy are associated with a commitment to a collaborative school culture. Then, the solution is reaching a shared understanding of what constitutes appropriate parent involvement has been found to be fruitful. Especially important is two-way communication that builds a shared vision of the goals of education, rather than one-way transmission of information to parents. Through joint work, teachers develop new teaching strategies, which enhance their effectiveness, thereby increasing perceptions of their current success and expectations for the future. A commitment to collaboration is more likely to be linked to teacher efficacy when teachers have control of classroom decision-making, and participate in school-wide decisions. Ross and Gray, 2006. The last but not the least question is what will be the role of the government at large in improving student performance and schools in general? Well, policymakers, state and local board members and state legislators, for example, should, as elected officials, have a comparative advantage in adjudicating conflicts among competing interests, winnowing these interests down into goals and standards on what should be taught, setting the legal mandate within which rewards and sanctions are administered, and translating the feedback from various quarters into new guidance. policymakers do not have a comparative advantage on issues relating to the specific content of standards or of practices that lead to student performance of a certain kind, rather they should have to focus on more general issues, benchmarks, drawing policies and strategies on how to apply school improvement programs. Elmore, 2000. Dear learner, how do you get the roles of parents, communities, society, educational leaders and the government at large? What issues should be considered here to work collaboratively? Do you have any unique mechanism or principles that govern all these partners into oneness? Very nice. Look your reaction with what it follows. Based on existing work, it is very difficult if not impossible to state general guiding principles that can be used to design institutional structures and to stimulate practices that result in large-scale improvement for all these stakeholders. However, at all levels of the system, isolation is seen as the enemy of improvement, so most management and professional development activities are specifically designed to connect teachers, principals, professional developers, and district administrators with each other and with outside experts around specific problems of practice. Elmore, 2000. They tended to rely more on a common culture of values to shape collective action than on bureaucratic rules and controls. The shared values typically focused on improvement of student learning as the central goal, evidence of steady, sustained improvement, a positive approach to problem-solving in the face of unforeseen difficulties. A view of structures, processes, and data as instruments for improvement rather than as ends in themselves, and a heavy internal focus by educational leaders on the demands of instruction, rather than a focus on events in the external environment. But the major issue or a major design principle to be considered here is to organize everyone's actions, at all levels of the system, around an instructional focus that is stable over time. It is not just to improve practicing performance as such but to teach people in the organization how to think and act around learning for continuous improvement. Focus also has to be accompanied by stability, in leadership, in the language that high-level administrators and board members use to describe the goals and purposes of the organization, and in the commitment to monitoring and redesigning policies and structures that are supposed to enable improvement. Such systems also create multiple avenues of interaction among classrooms and schools, as well as between schools and their broader environment, always focusing on the acquisition of new skills and knowledge. They adjust and adapt the routines of the workplace, with the primary purpose of creating settings where teachers, administrators, and outside experts can interact around common problems of practice. For this purpose, first, this shift requires a redefinition of leadership, away from role-based conceptions and toward distributive views. Second, a clearer set of design principles to guide the practice of large-scale improvement and a mutual respect that stems from an appreciation of the knowledge and skill requirements of different roles. According to Elmore, 2000, creating a new model of distributed leadership consists of two main tasks. 1. Describing the ground rules which leaders of various kinds would have to follow in order to engage in large-scale improvement. And 2. Describing how leaders of various kinds in various roles and positions would share responsibility in a system of large-scale improvement. It should go without saying that this model is necessarily provisional and tentative, since it is a considerable departure from the status quo, and its basic premise is that improvement involves both learning the ground rules and sharing responsibility for implementing them over time. At the same time, an alternative approach to school reform centers on the notion of accountability and systems to support accountability. Elmore views school improvement as something that goes together with strong internal accountability. Hence, the major design principle has to do with the development and conduct of accountability relationships in schools and school systems. It appears from early research that school systems that improve are those that have succeeded in getting people to internalize the expectations of standards-based accountability systems, and that they have managed this internalization largely through modeling commitment and focus using face-to-face relationships, not bureaucratic controls. The success of such a framework depends as much on the transactions across roles, the creation of mutual dependency and reciprocity, as it does on defining the core responsibilities of the roles themselves. This requires in turn pressing hard for more concrete knowledge about how large-scale improvement processes work. Developing a school system and culture that expects takes time but is well worth the investment. Hence, at present, our best estimate of those conditions that underpin school improvement efforts, and so therefore represent the key management arrangements, can be broadly stated as a commitment to staff development, practical efforts to ensure the involvement of staff, students and the community in school policies and decisions, transformational leadership approaches, effective coordination strategies, proper attention to the potential benefits of inquiry and reflection, a commitment to collaborative planning activity, Hopkins, 2000. However, there is a pressing problem we should have to consider here. Harris and MUIJS in Mulford, 2003, argue that the real challenge facing most schools is no longer how to improve but more importantly, how to sustain improvement. Further, sustainability will depend upon the school's internal capacity to maintain and support developmental work, and that sustaining improvement requires the leadership capability of the many rather than the few, and that improvements in learning are more likely to be achieved when leadership is instructionally focused and located closest to the classroom. Effective leadership in schools in this era is linked to the leader's ability to facilitate school improvement. The obvious core of school improvement is the role of the leader as an instructional leader, which is such a complex role. Though they cannot do it alone, school principals are of course key players in making these connections. Professional development for school leaders should provide lessons and tools concerning school, family, and community relations and partnerships. To summarize this lesson, changing those systems requires political leadership and institutional reform, as well as additional investments and inputs. Given the intangible function of education in social reproduction, solutions to shortcomings in the education system cannot be mechanistic, nor can they easily be transferred from place to place. UNMP, 2005. Most educational leaders and staff understand the importance of engaging families and communities to support school improvement efforts. Before we can build strong and effective partnerships with families, we have to believe not only that it's important but also that it can be done, and that we can do it. That means it's necessary for school staff to hold a set of positive beliefs about family engagement, LOWE, 2007. To guarantee genuine participation, requires a considerable change in the way education is planned and managed, the conscious enhancement of those factors and conditions which encourage participation, and the development of concrete mechanisms and procedures to guide planners and managers in developing such participatory activities. These will be examined in greater detail in the next two successive units. Unit Summary. Dear learner, how do you get the content of Unit 4? To summarize, We have seen the SIP vision is of students engaged in compelling learning situations, created by skillful teachers in school settings designed to promote learning for both groups of people. The learning and teaching engagements in SIP as described in this lesson are commonplace in schools that have a culture characterized by high expectations, collaboration and innovation. We have seen from different sources and research confirms that family involvement is a powerful influence on children's achievement in school. Finally, the unit stresses that if the purpose of leadership is the improvement of teaching practice in performance, then the skills and knowledge that matter are those that bear on the creation of settings for learning focused on clear expectations for instruction. As we shall see shortly, large-scale improvement requires a relatively complex kind of cooperation among people in diverse roles performing diverse functions. Review questions. Part 1. Choose the correct answer and write the letter on the space provided. 1. The concept of school improvement defined as A. Modifying classroom practice, B. A strategy for educational change that focuses on student achievement, C. Support teaching and learning, D. All, E. A and B. 2. Which one of the following the most significant areas in school improvement in Ethiopia? A. Student environment, B. Leadership and management, C. Community involvement, D. All, E. None. 3. Among the following which one is incorrect regarding leadership roles for parents? A. Materials developer, B. Key informant, C. Spokesperson, D. All, E. None. 4. Which one of the following is considered as characteristics of effective large-scale school improvement initiatives? A. Target staff development, B. Monitor the impact of policy on practice, C. Focus on specific outcomes which can be related to student learning, D. All, E. None. Part 2. Write true if the statement is correct and false if the statement is incorrect on the space provided. 1. Developing a school culture that expects takes time but is well worth the investment. 2. Communities are at the heart of students' identities and experiences. 3. Communities may take on unfamiliar roles as support for education initiatives. 4. Parent involvement is a process, not a program of activities. 5. Developing strong parent-professional alliances is a critical first step in SIP. Part 3. Write short answers for the following questions on the space provided. 1. Write down 5 leadership roles of parents in schools. 2. List 3 roles of educational administrators in facilitating community participation. 3. Explain the purpose of parental involvement in SIP.